A lot of confusion has surrounded HTML5 and when it'll be ready to use. The World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, tried to spread a little love among web developers on Valentine's Day 2011 with this press release, which sets 2014 as the target. That's certainly a big advance on an earlier prediction from Ian Hicksey, the editor of the specification, who's on record as saying he didn't expect the W3C to give it formal approval before 2022. But even bringing the date forward by 8 years still begs the question, what about old browsers that don't support HTML5? Old browsers notoriously take a long time to die, leaving web designers frustrated at not being able to embrace the latest technologies. In 2011, Microsoft took the unusual step of launching a website to try to encourage users to move off Internet Explorer 6. But even if they oblige, what about IE7 and IE8? Here's a page that's been developed using HTML5. I'm looking at it in Firefox 4, a really modern browser. But what does it look like in IE6? Let's take a look. As you can see, the page renders perfectly acceptably in IE6. It doesn't have all the same features, but the page remains accessible to anybody using the older browser. Just to prove I'm not cheating, let's test it in the W3C validator. As you can see, it says the page was successfully checked as HTML5. There's a warning there, but that's simply the fact that HTML5 is still experimental, so there's nothing to worry about. Now, to be honest, the code in the file doesn't use every new trick in the HTML5 book, but one of the fundamental principles guiding the development of HTML5 is that it needs to be backwards compatible. That's why XHTML 2.0 was abandoned. It would have broken billions of legacy web pages. As long as you choose features carefully, you can start using HTML5 right now. Work on the HTML5 specification is being driven by the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group, working in conjunction with the W3C. The version of the specification on the working group's website calls it a living standard. That's intended to send the message that HTML is evolving and will continue to do so. There's no point in waiting for a magic moment to start using HTML5. That moment is now. Let's take a quick look at what's new in HTML5. This is one of the predefined layouts in Dreamweaver CS5.5. If I switch to Code View, you can see that it uses an XHTML transitional doc type. This is what it looks like in Live View. This second page is also one of the predefined layouts in Dreamweaver CS5.5, but it's built using HTML5. This is what it looks like in Live View. As you can see, it looks identical to the other page. The difference lies in the HTML markup. This page uses the much shorter HTML5 doc type. But the real difference comes down in the body of the page. As you can see, the first HTML tag is a div tag, very familiar from HTML4 and XHTML, but the second tag is a new HTML5 header tag. That's followed a little bit later by a new nav tag, nav for navigation. Going a little bit further down the page, we come across an aside tag. The aside tag is intended to be used for things like sidebars or pull quotes. Going a little bit further down, we come across an article tag, and inside the article you have a section. So these are new semantic tags. The idea behind these new semantic tags is to give web pages a more logical structure than simply using meaningless div tags. Eventually, search engines and assistive technology for the visually impaired should be able to locate and extract relevant page content on the basis of these tags. That's the future. We're not there yet. One area where HTML5 elements come in really useful is in forms. Most form elements use the input tag, but HTML5 introduces many new type attributes, such as date and number. There are also new attributes such as required, max and min. These new attributes are designed to validate your form without the need for JavaScript validation. Not all browsers support these new features yet. For instance, Internet Explorer 9 just displays the page with ordinary text fields, and if I click the Submit button without filling any of the fields out, nothing happens. However, this is what the form looks like in Google Chrome. As you can see, the Arrival field actually fills it automatically with a date. The Number field has a number stepper. And if I try to submit the form without filling in one of the required fields, it'll tell me off. The video element has attracted a lot of attention. It allows you to embed videos directly in a web page without the need for a plugin, such as Flash, Silverlight or QuickTime. The HTML markup is remarkably simple too. Unfortunately, there's disagreement among browser makers over which types of video encoding to support, which rather takes the shine off a potentially great feature. But the Adobe Widget browser that's integrated into Dreamweaver CS5.5 simplifies cross-browser support. Let's take a look at it in action. While the video is initializing, you see a still picture. Then you can play the video.
Why was I sent to this place?
I'm not a hero.
If it's your fate to be a great hero.
Rather than rushing headlong into adopting every new feature offered by HTML5, pick and choose elements that add value to your sites. You probably never used every element in HTML4 or XHTML1. Using HTML5 should be no different. The first point that needs to be made about CSS3 is that, unlike earlier versions, it's not a single specification. The World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, learned its lesson from CSS2, which actually became a formal specification as far back as 1998. But then the W3C realized it contained many errors and omissions, something web designers had known for a long time. Browser support was bad or non-existent. It improved over the years, but it wasn't until early 2011 that CSS 2.1 was regarded stable enough to become a proposed recommendation. This page on the W3C website shows the current state of work on CSS3. Instead of a monolithic specification, CSS3 has been broken up into modules. As you can see, there are a lot of them. Those marked in orange and green with the letters LC or CR are pretty much done. LC means last call, and CR is candidate recommendation. But most are marked in yellow with the letters WD, working draft. Their fate depends on how quickly browser manufacturers can solve the technical problems that stand in the way of implementing them. But many features from the top of the list are already well supported. Selectors gives you finer control over selecting page elements without the need to pepper your HTML code with classes. The CSS color module introduces transparency and allows you to use HSL, hue, saturation, lightness color format, which should please many graphic designers. It also adds a huge range of color keywords, including such delights as blanched almond, hot pink, papaya whip, and peach puff. Two other modules that are particularly well supported in Dreamweaver CS5.5 are backgrounds and borders and media queries. Media queries lets you serve the same web page with different sets of style rules, depending on such factors as screen resolution, in effect allowing you to create a website that looks equally good in a desktop browser, a tablet, or a mobile phone. Let's take a quick look at some of the CSS3 features that you can implement quickly and easily in Dreamweaver CS5.5. First of all, you can use web fonts. This isn't an image, it's ordinary HTML text styled with an @FontFace rule. Next, how about a drop shadow on some text? Again, this isn't an image, it's generated by the CSS3 text shadow property. Rounded corners used to involve fiddling around with images and nested divs. Not anymore. Just use the border radius property. How about a drop shadow on the text? No problem. And on the box itself? Again, no problem. And just to round things off, how about giving it a translucent background colour? All done with CSS3. If you look at the style sheet, you'll see that some style rules are prefixed with -webkit or -moz. These are browser vendor-specific properties. They're not hacks, but they're designed to ensure that other browsers don't choke on CSS3 properties that might not yet be fully stable. You'll learn about them later in the course, but their existence means that you can start using a lot of CSS3 right now. The slogan on the jQuery website really says it all. Write less, do more. jQuery is a JavaScript library that's designed to remove the complexity of writing scripts that work reliably cross-browser. It's not a library in the sense that there are rows and rows of books, or even a website where you go hunting for scripts to add interactive features to your web pages. It's simply a JavaScript file that you attach to your web pages to make writing your own scripts much simpler. You download the file from the jQuery website by clicking this link. The production and development versions contain exactly the same code. The only difference is that the production version has all the white space removed to reduce the size of the file that's downloaded whenever someone visits your site. Let's download the development version. As you can see, it's a collection of JavaScript functions. Although the code in this file is complicated, you don't need to worry about it. Writing your own jQuery code is much simpler. jQuery isn't the only JavaScript library available. One of the earliest to be developed was the Dojo toolkit, which is highly regarded and used by leading companies. It was followed soon after by Prototype, which concentrated on the nuts and bolts of dealing with JavaScript. Prototype is frequently used in conjunction with Scriptaculous, which handles a lot of fancy interactivity. MooTools is another JavaScript library that's attracted a lot of attention. So with all these JavaScript libraries to choose from, why pick jQuery? This survey by w3text.com provides a pretty convincing answer. More than 3 out of every 4 websites that use a JavaScript library have settled on jQuery. They include big names like Bank of America, Amazon.com and the BBC. So why is it so popular? For a start, jQuery is very efficient. It's also relatively easy to learn. Here's a simple example of the type of interactivity that can be created with jQuery. If I turn on Live View, you see that the paragraphs have disappeared, and clicking on the heading toggles a paragraph open and closed and changes the direction of the arrow. There are no links in the headings, and there's no JavaScript markup in the HTML. All the code is down here at the bottom. This is the link to the jQuery library. And these 11 lines of script do all the interactivity. Compare it with this page, which does exactly the same thing, but using standard JavaScript. The code is 4 times longer than the jQuery version. The jQuery code is not only shorter, it uses CSS selectors, leveraging your existing skills as a web designer. Dreamweaver CS5 has full code hinting for jQuery, speeding up both the learning process and the development time. Designing for multiple platforms and screen resolutions is a major theme in Dreamweaver CS5. The page that's open here is part of a site that's been designed using media queries. As you can see in the Related Files toolbar at the top, there are several style sheets attached to the page for phone, tablet and desktop. Let's switch on Live View. This shows the way that the page will look in a desktop, but if I click the little down arrow next to the multi-screen button, it opens a new menu called the Window Sizes menu, which, as you can see, shows various sizes for feature phone, smartphone, tablet, and popular sizes of desktop monitors. Let's click 320 by 480 smartphone. And as you can see, the page is now displayed the way that it would look on a smartphone. Open the menu again and try for tablet, and we have a different layout. It all comes from the same HTML, but the CSS is being optimized for the different size of screen resolution. To see all three versions at the same time, if I click the multi-screen preview button, I then see what it looks like in a tablet, what it looks like in a smartphone, and the desktop version. And what's very nice about the multi-screen preview panel is that it's navigable. So if I click on the dining link, it takes me to another page in the same website, and I see the same page in all three windows, what it looks like in a phone, in a desktop. Let's close the multi-screen preview panel. Dreamweaver simplifies working with media queries through the creation of a site-wide media queries file. If I go to the Modify menu, open Media Queries, you can see that I've set up this site with a site-wide media queries file called Tozai MQ CSS. And here are my three style sheets, which are controlled by media queries. The first one shows only for a maximum width of 400 pixels. The second one, anything between 401 pixels and 768 pixels, and the desktop one is anything which is more than 769 pixels. With the Media Queries dialog box in Dreamweaver CS55, you can add as many style sheets as you like and control them with media queries, but I think that 3 is probably about the optimum. Right, let's just close that dialog box. Dreamweaver CS55 not only supports many CSS3 properties in live view, it makes it easier to apply such features as rounded corners and drop shadows visually. Let's open the CSS Styles panel and change the border radius of this pink box. As you can see, it opens a new panel, and I can change the size visually. As I keep on increasing the size, you can see it's changing in live view. You can also apply a different radius to each corner. It follows slightly after the changes that are made within the panel here. Another significant change in Dreamweaver CS55 is the full range of colour formats that are now available. If I open the colour picker and click the right arrow at the top right of the colour picker, go down to Colour Format, open the menu there, you can see that we've got the full range of colour formats that are supported by CSS3. RGB, red, green, blue, RGBA, which is red, green, blue with alpha transparency, HSL, which is hue, saturation, lightness, and HSLA with alpha transparency, and then the hexadecimal colours. The CSS Styles panel and code hints list not only those CSS3 properties that are widely supported in the latest browsers, but also ones that are still experimental, so Dreamweaver is ready when you are. If you switch to the category view of the CSS Styles panel, you'll see that down at the bottom we have Mozilla, Microsoft, Opera and WebKit, all of the various vendor-specific properties that the different browser makers are experimenting with. Perhaps less noticeable, but nevertheless very important, is support for advanced CSS3 selectors, such as the nth child pseudo class. As you can see, I've applied the nth child pseudo class to the fourth list item in the navigation menu, giving the fourth item in the navigation menu the correct left margin when the screen is between 401 and 680 pixels wide. A major feature in Dreamweaver CS55 is integrated support for jQuery Mobile, a sophisticated JavaScript and CSS framework for mobile websites. Doesn't look very much in design view, but if I switch on live view, it suddenly comes to life. The action in live view is a little bit jerky, but in a real mobile device it's very smooth, very impressive indeed. But that's not all. Dreamweaver has an integrated version of PhoneGap, an open source framework that converts HTML, CSS and JavaScript into native apps that run on Android and iOS. Other new features include improved security through support for FTPS, uploading files with FTP over the secure sockets layer, and also the Adobe Widget Browser is now installed automatically with Dreamweaver. There's no need to download and install it separately. Finally, for PHP developers, the good news is that the code hints have been upgraded to PHP 5.3. Although the name Dreamweaver CS5.5 makes it sound like a point release, this is really a very impressive version.